Is the next recession right around the corner? And hey, what do you do to prepare yourself?
It's Brian Preston, the money guy.
Brian, I am very, very excited about this show we're about to go through because I think it is the show that we need to be doing in this moment, right? Things are a little uncomfortable. They're a little scary. Some things out there might be worrisome. And so we want to prepare you, the listener, you, the audience, you, the financial mutant, to know what could be coming. And if it is coming, how can you best prepare yourself?
Yeah, I think it gets lost sometimes. We talk about automating your wealth building process, and we forget that the whole thing only works if we have risk built into the system. There has to be volatility. You know, and we share this all the time. You're going to make money 7 to 8 years out of every decade, but there's going to be 2 to 3 years every 10 years, or 20 to 30% where you know there's going to be excessive volatility, and you just need to be prepared. So that's what this show is. Break glass, watch this before you do that. And I think it's going to give people a lot of the knowledge they need to make it through this.
So I think to start off, Brian, we ought to start with some vocabulary, right? Something really unique happened in the first quarter of this year. We actually had negative GDP growth. And so naturally, whenever we see our first quarter, people start using the R word. Is this a recession? Is a recession coming? So we thought it'd be valuable to define for you what is a recession. And very simply, a recession refers to a significant decline in economic activity. It's generally recognized as 2 consecutive quarters of decline in GDP. So if we have another quarter with GDP negative, then that technically would qualify as a recession.
Well, recession, I think, makes people get nervous because it's not just the stock market. This actually impacts financial, not the stock market, but also the housing market, the employment numbers. There's a lot of ripple effects that come when the economy's in struggling and having issues.
And one of those ripple effects that we often see is negative stock market performance. Now, I want to be clear. We're going to talk a little bit in a moment about bear markets. A bear market and a recession are not the same thing, but they often go hand in hand. And for most of us, the way that we feel recessions on a very personal level is what's going on in our portfolio, what's happening in our retirement accounts, what's happening with our army of dollar bills. And generally speaking, in recessionary times, that's often reflected in the way the market performs, which sometimes turns into an actual bear market.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the positive side. When markets are up from the bottom 20%, that's a bull market.
That's a bull market.
We all like those. Those feel great. You feel like a genius while you're investing and making that automatic money. However, when markets from the peak lose 20%, that's considered a bear market. What is interesting is that you don't have to have a recession to have a bear market, but it is interesting when you look at the numbers that recessions are an indicator that bear markets are right around the corner.
So we thought, okay, if we want to think about this in the context of have we been here and have we done this before, it's interesting not just to look at this current year's trading activity or where we are year to date, but this is a great piece put out by First Trust. You've seen us use this before, and it shows the history of bear markets and the history of bull markets here in the U.S. dating all the way back to 1942. And so for those of you out there listening on Spotify, iTunes, iHeartRadio, what this shows is how long the average bull market lasts and how severe it is or how good it is, how frothy it is. And it shows how long the average bear market lasts and how severe the decline is. Well, if you can see the picture on the screen, these two are not the same.
Yeah, I mean, let's give some information here for the people who don't have the visual also. I told Daniel, I was like, I wish we could highlight this, so I'll just read it to everybody. The average bull market period lasted 4.4 years with an average cumulative total return of 155%.
That is stellar. So if you think about it, your money is more than doubling over the course of about 4.5 years. That's pretty exciting.
So that's the average length, and that's the average rate of return that you get out of bull markets going back to 1942. Now look at the bear market, the negative side of this. The average bear market period lasted 11.3 months.
That's
not years. That's not even a full year. That's 11.3 months with an average cumulative loss of 32.1%.
And so 32.1%, that sounds painful. That's a big drawdown. That's not a comfortable thing. But when you think about that in the context of a bull market that makes 155% over 4.5 years, it just doesn't seem quite as bad as you might think or as the media might make it seem.
So I love how this slide gives a lot of context because I want you guys to know the good is so much more powerful and happens so much more often than the bad that we wanted to come up with how do you handle the bad, because one of the best things is one thing to tell you, hey, it's going to be good, just hang in there, but I know it emotionally hurts. It pulls all these behavioral things where you feel like react. What do I need to be doing to cope with the losses I'm seeing on my financial statements, on my net worth statement? I'm seeing this stuff all over social media. We actually, and Bo, I want to give you credit for this. He said, look, I think we just have to go with it. I mean, when people are stressed out, the first thing you can tell them, and this is going to be a little bit of a contrarian take here, Bo came up with have a drink.
Yeah, sometimes when things are uncomfortable from the financial world, we have to take a drink. We have to step back. We wanted you guys to have a very easy way to remember this, an easy way to think of this. And it's basically a 5-step process to prepare yourself for the next recession if that's coming. And here are the 5 steps, and then we'll dive in each one. Do a plan assessment. Recognize risk tolerance versus risk capacity, how they're different and how that impacts you. Ignore the noise. Notice any silver lining opportunities. And then the last thing, and possibly the most important thing, is know that this too shall pass. If you can kind of work through this 5-step process, whenever the markets freak out, whenever the economy freaks out, you're going to set yourself up most likely to be able to get through it just fine.
I mean, I like to build my quotes around things you do well, Bo.
Okay.
And the first one, D, do a plan assessment. Yep. And I always like this because I hear you say it with clients. I've heard you say it on some of our commentary, is that the plan we have designed for you is good before the volatility and recession or whatever we're facing comes our way, during the middle of it, and it's good afterwards. So that's why there's a lot of benefit to doing the plan. But I wanted to ask, where are people, what are some things they can do to make sure they're doing this right?
Well, I think the first thing that you have to do is you have to answer the question, do I have a plan in place? I think a lot of folks don't recognize, they're just kind of letting life happen. You get out of college and you start working and maybe you're saving or maybe you're not, but you haven't thought about the whys and the whats. You need to answer the question, do I actually have a plan in place? If I don't, step one would be, hey, I need to develop some sort of financial plan, some sort of way to tactically think about what I'm doing with my army of dollar bills and how I'm doing that. Well, then once you have that plan in place, you ought to think about, have things recently happened that have made me get off kilter? Perhaps did I let myself get too far out over my skis from a risk perspective, right? The markets have been performing really well. Did I start chasing some things that maybe I shouldn't have been chasing? This is a great time to really reassess that and say, okay, do I have a plan in place? And is that plan in place actually a good one?
Yeah, and think about life events too. I mean, what's going on out there? Should you update and adjust from that? And then, Bo, this is an important one, and I love it when we get feedback off of this, because one of the great things when people take listeners and everybody takes the relationship to the next level, they love when we actually do that retirement plan and we stress test it. We try to figure out, is this thing broken? And you actually put it into this. You said, hey, have you Monte Carlo'd up?
That's right, exactly. So one of the things we want to know is it's easy for us to think about the best case scenario. I'm going to retire. I'm going to build my army of dollar bills. I'm going to retire, and I'm going to sail off. I'm going to sail off into the sunset. Sailboat off into the sunset. If you have not stress tested your thing, say, well, what if I retired a bad time? I mean, a lot of the comments right now coming in are, hey, is now a good time to retire? Should I postpone it? One of the ways that you can go into this with some security, and we do this for our clients, is by doing a Monte Carlo scenario on your portfolio. If I have this much money and I'm planning on doing these types of things and I want to spend this level of money and I have this type of income and I'm going to live for this long and I want to assume this type of return, and I run through different iterations of those variables, what's my probability of success? That even if I get unlucky and I retire at the worst time in the worst market with the worst stuff going on, do I have a high probability of success I'm going to make it through that? If you've not stress tested your portfolio, or if you stress tested it but you've not revisited it, now might be a really good time to do that, to assess, is the plan that I have in place still the best plan for me?
Yeah, that's why when you're younger and you're just creating the napkin plan, you can use the 4% withdrawal rate. You can do all kind of simple back of the napkin type stuff. But as you do get closer, like I say, when you're within 5 years of retirement,
Absolutely.
this is a very valuable tool that's going to give you the peace of mind to know that you can handle whatever is coming your way. And then the last thing on this point I would point out is just your cash management. Do you have cash reserves? Are you actually taking into account? Because that's what's going to get you through any volatility you might be facing, is if you have the cash, you have the liquidity, so that you're not facing this as an emergency of, oh my goodness, how am I going to pay the bills?
Absolutely. All right, so that's the D, do a plan assessment. The R in having a drink is recognizing the difference in risk tolerance and risk capacity. Again, I think it's important, Brian. We ought to do some vocabulary, some definitions here. Risk tolerance refers to your mental willingness to take risk. You may say, hey, the market could be down 90%, I don't lose sleep. Or I want to go buy the most aggressive, most volatile thing I can, and I'm okay with that. That describes your risk tolerance. Risk capacity is the amount of risk required to meet your financial goals, or the limit on the amount of risk that your portfolio or your financial circumstance can sustain and still be able to reach your long-term goals.
I always find this interesting because especially my entrepreneurs, people who are very comfortable with taking risk, I think they have a problem or they struggle with the fact of their ability to take risk and digest it, process it, has allowed them to build wealth by being that cowboy.
Yep.
And
because it works.
It does
work,
on. But there does come a point where you've won the game. And what are you building? You're taking on too much. And that's what I love always bringing in this conversation of risk capacity. Because yes, just because you can absorb, you can handle emotionally the risk, all the volatility, that means you have a high risk tolerance. But risk capacity, we actually like to put math to this because it is one of those things. Because I always think math is so incredible in the fact that it's easy to tell somebody you lose 10%. To get your money back to where it was before that 10% loss, you have to make 11%. That's always a part. But the reality is that the glide path, or the way you want to think about this, is the numbers of math. If you lose 50%, take this, because you have to make 100% to get that back.
That's right.
So if you're thinking about, and I always, this is good, follow me on this a little bit. We know stock markets make, somewhere between 8 to 10%. So we took it right in the middle at 9%. If you were somebody who took a 40% loss and you had to make 67% to get yourself back, it might take you 7 years to get it back. Right. If you were somebody who lost 50%, it's going to take you 11 years to get it back. If you're somebody who's 60 years old, you're retired and you're living off these assets, do you really want to have that much volatility built into it? So, Bo, we have a solution on this. This is why we always talk about when you're talking about risk capacity, taking into account the risk with the asset allocation, you're going to change your asset allocation as you get age and your risk profile.
Absolutely. One of the things you have to make sure you keep a beat on is, do I have the correct amount of risk on, risk off assets? I mean, it's very, very easy. In such a strong bull market that we've come through, we begin to misassess our own risk tolerance. When things are going good, we feel great. We feel like we can be a cowboy. We feel like nothing is going to frighten us. But when things start to turn, I think Warren Buffett's the one who says, you can always tell who's been skinny dipping when the tide goes out. A lot of people's true risk capacity is uncovered in a downturn. And if you find yourself in that situation, that's where you have to make really difficult decisions. You have to pare back lifestyle. You have to sell assets. You have to figure out a way to make things work. If you can get the risk capacity right on the front end, you're going to set yourself up for long-term success. And the way you do that from a portfolio standpoint is understanding I need some portion of my portfolio in risk assets. Even if I'm retiring, odds are I'm going to have a 20, 30, 40-year retirement. I need some portion of my portfolio to exist in that bucket. But if I am living off of these assets, if this is what's going to provide for my daily, monthly, weekly, yearly need, I need some portion of risk off or risk reduced assets. The correct portfolio for you mixes those, that no matter whether the market goes up 30% or down 30%, you are positioned well to live the type of lifestyle you want to live over the long term.
And I've mentioned this before. This is also back to risk tolerance versus risk capacity, that cash buffer, this is what's going to change from when you're working and you have decades before you retire. You can have a cash reserves of 3 to 6 months because that's to protect you from the sudden, maybe you have a medical expense or you lose your job or things like that. As you approach retirement, though, you could see that cash reserves balloon up to 18
That's
to 36 months because you're living off this money. You want to make sure you have enough money and liquidity and access to capital that if the stock market's down 30%, 40%, you can be there and have liquidity for the 2 to 3 years it takes for it to recover, and you don't have to sell a distressed asset. Don't neglect the ability to have some access to liquidity. I know cash doesn't pay much, but you will appreciate it. It is no different. I say this all the time. Your cash is like oxygen. We all take it for granted until we're underwater, and then we're like, oh, man, I'm so glad I have this oxygen tank on me. Your emergency reserves is that oxygen tank when the economy goes underwater.
And you have to remember, what is the purpose of those? Those dollars are not necessarily supposed to grow. Now, we've recently seen some interest rate increases, so it's likely that savings accounts will start paying us money on our cash again. But we've been living in this place right now where cash has been paying nothing. And while that stinks, it's not something you can get away from. It is a necessary part of your portfolio, specifically if you are someone who's transitioning into financial independence or retirement. You just can't ignore it. You just can't not do it.
So, Bo, let's get back to your take a drink plan.
Okay, take a drink.
So we've already gone through the D, talking about do you have a plan? We've already talked about risk is the R, risk capacity and risk tolerance. The I think this one's so important too. Ignore the noise.
Yeah, it's really interesting, Brian. We were talking in show prep about how there's only been one bear market in the past, 50 years that lasted over 2 years or so. And it was back at the .com bubble burst. And you're like, man, I was doing this back then. I was managing money back then. I'm curious to know, from your perspective, do you think the financial world is louder or less loud now than it was then? Meaning, has it gotten more difficult to ignore the noise than perhaps it was 20 or 30 years ago?
I definitely think that because, look, the internet existed, hence .com bubble bursting, but social media was not on the scene yet. And I do feel like social media has added a lot more noise and voices in the background, and you just don't get away from it. This is a little off topic, but we always talk about like bullying. When I was a kid, you only had to worry about a bully picking on you, maybe in your woodworking class while you were in school. Whereas now you have to worry about, are you going to get people picking on you even when you leave the school? Well, it's the same way with the way you guys, what you let in your brain with sources of information while you're going through a market downturn like this, is that it used to be, hey, as long as I made it through this week or whatever. Now, think about like cryptocurrencies and things like those markets don't even close. It used to be that markets were open Monday through Friday. Now markets are open 24 hours a day. It's so wild that we have inundated ourselves with social media. We're trying to create ways that we can always be on. This does not make your job easier. So we wanted to talk about what you need to understand, key understandings that will protect you from the noise that could make you react and actually hurt your long-term financial success.
But maybe you're someone out there saying, hey, Brian, I get that. I'm not going to listen to social media. I'm going to trust the experts. I'm only going to listen to like reputable sources telling me what's going on. And so the question that you ask is, can the media, can the financial world, can the powers that be accurately predict recessions or accurately predict bear markets? So we want to play a little game, right? That's what the team has set up. The team wanted to play this. We're going to show you a real media headline. And in the comments right now, if you're with us live, we want you to guess what the return of the S&P 500 was over the next 3 years. So I'm going to pull up a headline. I'm not going to tell you when it came from. I'm just going to show you the headline. And I want you to tell me, what did the market do over the next 36 months?
Okay, let's jump in this. This will be great.
Here's the first one. This is from the Financial Times. And this says the risk of a double dip recession is rising. So it sounds like things must have been going pretty bad there was a single dip, and now it looks like another dip might be coming. So what did the market do?
I feel
after
like
this?
financial journalists have a whole word bank. They have like a bag and they just reach in, and you see things like double dip, recession, risk. They kind of just put together the headlines off of what they pulled out of the bag. Well, we know, because I could say double dip recession. We hear about this every time we come through any type of volatility in the market. Go ahead and give me the big reveal.
So this was actually from August 23rd of 2009. So this is immediately after the Great Recession. We saw a recovery starting in March of that year. Over the next 3 years, from August of 2009 through August of 2012, the S&P 500 made 37.6%.
So first of all, let's go back in the Wayback Machine of 2009 when this article was written with the risk of double dip recession is rising. Even though we've made it through the 2008, the Great Recession, emotions are probably pretty raw because, everybody went through a lot of volatility through there. So to see that headline, you're like, oh, man, this is going to be scary. And I even want to take it a step further. If you look at the actual visual, and for those that are listening, I'm going to give you the clarity on this. It does look like, if I looked at the visual, you're like, hey, I could actually draw a W out of the volatility of what was going on in the market there. But this is why, guys, I say this all the time, so hear me on this. When you're investing, this is not a straight line endeavor where you're just walking up a slight incline and making those perfect little 8 to 10% rates of returns. What you're actually doing is walking up a mountain with a yo-yo where, yes, it is in the short term going up and down, but you're going to a higher place over the long term. And this is the perfect illustration. Even though you can outline a W, you still are in a much higher place, a 37.6% better place from August 23rd of 2009 when this was written.
All right, so let's do another one. Here's the next headline. This is from the Mercury News. This says, economist who predicted busted housing bubble says another recession is coming. So this is an expert who's already gotten it right once. I mean, this guy called it. He said that the housing bubble is going to burst. And now this person is saying another recession is coming. So if that's the case, surely he knows what's going on. What happened in the markets over the next 3 years?
I always think it's interesting. I saw this, somebody on social media, I think it was Twitter, said the only way the perma bears make money, you show me a perma bear that is loaded, and I'll show you somebody that sells a great subscription model to their systems. And then when I see this, because they do, the media loves to roll out their perma bear expert that got the last downturn called, and they say, this is why you need to be paying attention. So economists predicted busted housing market, says recession is coming. How could this go wrong?
So here is when this was. This was July 22nd of 2014. So if you rewind July of 2014 through July of 2017, S&P 500 made 24.7% in that 3-year period. So it sounds like maybe this economist who predicted the housing bubble didn't nail it. He did not hit it just right.
I always think it's interesting. We didn't create a slide. We could have. We've used this with clients a lot. You guys, everybody, please understand, we always look at the values at the beginning of the year, at the end of the year, and that's how we determine did the market make money or lose money. But I think the typical investor would be shocked to find out that intra-year, from the beginning of the year to some point before we reach year end, there could be a 13.5% pullback. That is typically the average intra-year adjustment. So when you look at the visual, once again, it's going to be all over the place. It's not that slight slope where you're just counting on you making your money. No, that's CD investing. This is completely different. You have to have the volatility to get that outsized long-term performance. Embrace it and understand what you're getting into.
All right, so there's two we've done, Brian. Let's do another one. This is actually from the Wall Street Journal, right? So this is a big boy.
Oh, it has to be right.
This has got to be right. So it says, why soaring assets and low unemployment mean it's time to start worrying. It's time to start worrying because there's some indicators, and we've been here before. We know what's going on. What happened over the next 3 years? Well, if you look at the timing here, this headline was from July of 2017. By the way, where our last 3-year period ended. So if you think about like compounding growth, we should be painting a pretty clear picture for you. Over the next 3 years, from July of 2017 through July of 2020, and it seems to me like there was a thing in 2020, I can't remember. It looks like, I feel like something happened that market year. Even with that, over the next 3 years, the market S&P 500 made 32%. So in all three of these scenarios, Brian, They missed it. These media headlines telling you, uh-oh, worry, be careful, tread cautiously, danger's coming. None of them actually came to fruition. While there may have been small bouts of that, if you could stay disciplined and consistent, you were rewarded as an investor over the last decade.
Well, I think a thing, if I was giving somebody who's new to investing a key piece of advice, this is, people always say, how do you know the market's going to go up? You know, and I always say, and be careful, because the experts will roll out like this one. This headline from the Wall Street Journal from 2017 said, soaring assets. That's a positive, typically. Low unemployment, that's another positive. But now they're telling you, hey, because of all this positive stuff, you should be scared. They will always pull out little tidbits of information and use that to give them the expert status. But what they never talk about is what's actually happening in the long term is if you could look at the economy, say 20 years ago to where the economy is now, it's just bigger. It is it's natural because I think it's part of being the human condition is we are always looking to expand, grow, build, innovate. And when you invest, and we're always talking about index investing and other things, you're basically buying into that concept that we're building a great, big, beautiful tomorrow where the world is innovating and getting bigger and better. So it's much easier to understand that you're buying into something for the long term than getting caught up in the minutia, the noise, as we talked about in the drink system. This is the stuff to keep yourself safe.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting. If you think about how financial media works, right? It's not often because they're telling a pleasant story. It's not often because they're saying, hey, things are great. You should be excited. Things are going to be okay. It's often because they want to get you scared. They want to sell fear because fear will keep you tuned in. So you can't let fear become the primary driver behind your financial decisions. If you begin to do that, you begin to make mistakes and you begin to deviate from the plan that should have been good before the craziness happened, that should still be good while the craziness is going on, and will be good after the craziness has passed.
Bo, you talk about it. I love this when we're dealing with clients. Understand and separate what you can control and what you don't control and what's actionable, what's not actionable. Walk us through what you use when you're talking to a client about that.
Yeah, so there's tons of information coming at us, right? Oh, this asset is at an all-time low, or this asset is at an all-time high, or this thing is worrisome, or this thing is scary, or geopolitical crisis, or Russia or Ukraine, all these things. There are certain pieces of information that are information, and they may even be accurate, but they're not actionable. There's nothing that you can or should do with that information. There are other types of information that can be actionable. This is like a really easy example we'll talk about in a moment, like strategies like loss harvesting. Hey, if it's factual that the markets are down, I have losses in my portfolio, there might be a tax benefit that I can glean from that. That is an actionable piece of information. Hey, I'm going into retirement. Perhaps I need more emergency reserves. I don't need 6 months anymore. I need 18 months. That is actionable information. Oh man, the next double dip recession could be coming, or asset prices are getting frothy. That's information. I don't know that I would argue that is actionable information. So you need to learn, how do I discern the difference and only act on the information that I should be acting on?
Yeah, and know what you control and what you don't control. And if you don't control it, be aware of it, but don't let it consume you. I mean, that's the big thing, because I do think the profit motive of the financial press, or really any press, is not aligned to your personal success. Right. And I think that's really helped us in a lot of ways, is because the financial press does not care about your financial success personally. They want, and Bo already gave this away, they want your eyes, they want your ears, they want your brains, they want you tuned in to whatever they're sharing. And that's why you always hear the adage, if it bleeds, it leads, is because we as humans, we have this strong emotional reaction to fear, and that's what they use as a tool. So don't let the noise hurt you. So following up with the drink system that Bo came up with, take a drink. Ignore the noise.
All right, so we've gone through D, do a plan assessment. We've gone through R, recognize the difference in risk tolerance and risk capacity. I is ignore the noise. So now we've got to get to N. And N, I think, is where financial mutants kind of live. I think that this is sort of the inflection point where our people are, where you listening to this show are. You have to notice silver lining opportunities. A true financial mutant can likely find the silver lining in most circumstances.
Oh man, this is the part I get excited about, because first of all, let's talk about point of maximum financial opportunity. We all, the basic thing, and we even made fun in one of our React videos. We made fun of this Instagram couple that posted, "Hey, this is all you gotta do is just you go in and you buy when stocks are low, you watch them ride up, and then you sell them when they're high.
It's that easy.
This system is bulletproof." So you always hear buy low, sell high. What nobody ever tells you is when is the buy low? What does it feel like? What's going on around you? And that's what I'm going to go ahead and roll it out. I know a lot of you go roll your eyes out because you know, the Oracle from Omaha has this famous quote that everybody rolls out when the market starts having volatility. And here it is. It's be fearful when others are greedy. Be greedy when others are fearful. The buying low concept is guess what? When everybody else is losing their mind because they're so scared and just engrossed in fear.
But here's the hard part. We are herd animals. We all are subjected to the same types of emotions as our peers. So it's often difficult for us to recognize when the crowd is greedy and we should be fearful, or when the crowd is fearful and we should be greedy. We all are susceptible to the cycle of market emotions. You've seen this all the time where we go through these really, really positive high stages of euphoria when everything's looking good. These are, you call these the cocktail times, right?
Yeah.
When you're at a cocktail party and your brother-in-law can't wait to tell you about how he got into the latest cryptocurrency 8 months ago and he's just killing it, right? Or he bought this stock and it's tripled in value. People get so excited because everything is doing well. Everything is doing well. But then things start to change, right?
Yeah, I always think it's interesting because the first few months after a market downturn, you see people go, it's all right, I'm a long-term investor. I'm actually going to double down. I'll go find some extra money, put it in there. But then it keeps going and it keeps dragging on a few more months. You start seeing the fear, the desperation, panic. And this is, I will tell you, this is the point where you hit capitulation. And that word, it's a sinister word, because when you see capitulation, this is where people start questioning, the system is broken. I'm getting out of this. How could I be so dumb? We're in a new paradigm. You start seeing headlines with these type things. This is what I want everybody to understand. That is the maximum point of financial opportunity. If you ever wanted a compass or a map that showed you where is buy low, it is when everybody else is like, get me the heck out of this thing. It doesn't feel good when you do it. But if you can do this in the long term, you will be successful. So a lot of people are probably saying, well, wait a minute. We know that you've showed us headlines. Nobody has a crystal ball. There has to be behavioral things we can do to make sure that we're successful in this.
I think it's so interesting, Brian. We talk about this cycle of market emotions, and it looks very, now I'm going back to college here, which is a long time ago. It looks very logarithmic, right? Meaning that like the peaks and the troughs are equal. And so people think about investing as like this zero-sum thing. I'm either up or I'm down. I'm either at the top or I'm at the bottom. But the actual picture looks very different. While our emotions may move that way, what actually happens in our bank account or investment accounts is very different. So Daniel did us a solid. He went and mapped the S&P 500 from 2000 all the way until 2022, showing the last 22 years of market movement. And he was kind enough to superimpose the little roller coaster riders on here, showing you the different points of maximum financial risk and then the different points of maximum financial opportunity. But what you can see is, as we move through time, you can be a roller coaster rider or a yo-yo thrower. You're steadily moving to higher and higher ground as you go through the process.
I just realized the way we could have improved this even better. So Daniel wants to. We could have the roller coaster riders getting ready to fall down, but then ride it right back up. We could put the yodeler from The Price is Right, where they're walking up the thing where you go, yo, 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 going
I'm sorry,
up.
What's he do?
No, I'm not doing that. I don't yodel. But it is one of those things where you could do it because that's the person, it's the yodeler with the yo-yo that's going up.
Yep.
Know that it's not going to feel good while you're going through this, but with a little bit of knowledge, you can know that you're going to be okay, and you can actually see the silver lining, and you can buy low, and then your future self will be like, wow, we got a heck of a deal. I know if you went back in time and looked at the shares that I bought in like March of 2009,
Yep.
those were some of the best shares that I could have gotten because I was the dead bottom of what happened in that great recession downturn. Same thing happened with the pandemic. That was not too long ago in March of 2020, where there are people that immediately had huge turnarounds. That's why I like having a system that buys no matter what's going on. Just always be buying and you'll be rewarded.
And we're even going to talk about that a little bit in a moment. But before we get there, one of the other things that we want to mention, if you think about silver lining opportunities, a great one right now that you may not be taking advantage of, that you potentially should be taking advantage of, is loss harvesting. And again, when we use jargon and terminology, we think it's important to share vocabulary with you. Tax loss harvesting is simply the practice of selling a security that has a loss. By realizing that loss, investors may offset taxes on future gains and or income in the future. So it's literally a paper transaction to lock in losses that you can use. And we're going to do a very quick, I promise, Brian, very quick example. We have two investors. We have Timmy and Tina. Let's say that both of them have $100,000 invested in an index fund inside of a taxable brokerage account. Well, let's say the value of the investment drops by 20%. So they hit the bear market tariff. So now both of their investments are worth $80,000. Timmy decides to sell his $80,000 of the index and invest in a different index. It can still be similar, it just can't be identical. So he had one small cap index and he's buying a different small cap index, but roughly the same investment strategy. So now they both still have $80,000 invested, just Timmy's is in something else. The value of both of them, because they're similarly invested, they're buying small cap stocks, whatever the thing is, recovers and it goes back to $100,000. So now they're both sitting at $100,000 of investment value. Timmy, though, has a $20,000 loss that he locked in that he can deduct against capital gains or ordinary income. Tina's investment is worth the same as Timmy's, but she has no loss to deduct. So because he noticed the silver lining in that bear market, he was able to go clip that loss that will make him able to be more tax efficient moving forward.
And a lot of people will say, hey, look, I know that this is great that he locked in the loss, but I want you now, you've reset your basis to a lower point. So now you're going to have to pay taxes on that money eventually. Well, this is why I always like to say financial mutants. If you are a person that gives to charity and you're charitably minded, you actually could turn that 1 point into another positive in this strategy. And the fact that, yes, you have the paper loss, but then when the market recovers, now you've got highly appreciated securities that you could actually donate to charities and get that double benefit of they get the full amount. You don't pay income tax on that gain, but you get the full deduction off of its value. That's powerful for everyone involved. Be a financial mutant and take advantage of those things. But also, like when you have a sales strategy like this, we just talked about with this, you could loss harvesting, but also this is a great time to rebalance.
That's right.
As you start looking at asset classes on ones that are underperforming, overperforming, and then the overall makeup of your total portfolios. Walk everybody through what are the benefits here.
Yeah, it's not uncommon, and we do this a lot. In our day jobs, we are financial advisors, right? So we help people navigate their financial lives, and part of that is helping them with portfolio design. Well, it's not uncommon for someone to come to us, and maybe they have a mutual fund they bought 15 years ago, but it's really expensive and it's really tax inefficient. But because they bought it so long ago and because compound interest does work, they have a big embedded gain. So we're not able to sell that or else we'll trigger a large tax consequence. So we kind of design the portfolio around that, or maybe it's an individual stock that's in that same place. When we do see bouts of volatility, perhaps now we can exit that position, or we can use losses to offset gains that allow us to exit that position to better have the portfolio that we ultimately want. It creates opportunities that we would not have been able to implement earlier because of the volatility. So you have to recognize that, and you have to be thinking through, what are the soldiers in my army of dollar bills doing? And does this unique moment in time give me a leg up to get better positioned with where I want to be?
And then this is the last point we'll make here about noticing silver lining opportunities. And this is one we talk all the time about discipline, as a key component. We also talk about you have to have the ability to have income, and then that creates assets. And then you have to have the component of time to make it through things. These are all the ingredients to wealth creation. I also like people to know the behavior of always be buying. I mean, if you can actually look and see, especially if you're decades from retirement, and look at a downturn or volatile period in the market and be like, hey, this is a great chance to buy low, build for the future, and just create an automatic wealth building opportunity. Get excited about what this means for you. It's good to be a contrarian.
It breaks our heart, Brian, when we see young folks that freak out and they cut off their automatic account builders, their monthly savings, say, I'm just going to sit on the side. I'm just going to wait. You need to recognize that periods of volatility when you're young are your friend. You should be a financial mutant that gets excited about that. All right, so do a plan assessment, recognize the difference in risk tolerance, risk capacity, ignore the noise, notice any silver lining opportunities, and then the K in having a drink is know that this too shall pass.
Yeah, I always think that it's interesting. I mean, we have all these cable channels. It's on the nightly news when the stock market's down. But nobody ever talks about the fact that all this horsepower, all the calories that are spent worried about the stock market. And I love Peter Lynch's quote, because he talks about in here is that, the fact that so much money's actually been lost. Worried about this more than actually happened. His actual quote is, far more money has been lost by investors trying to anticipate corrections than lost in the corrections themselves. That breaks my heart, because you see, and there's all kind of studies out there that show, even though index investments make between 8 to 11%, depending upon which ones you're looking at, the average investor will underperform that by several percent over a long-term period. And you're like, why? What happened there? What caused them to not just buy, hold, and get the reward of being a long-term investor?
One of the things we always try to encourage our clients to think through, or when we're talking to them in these difficult times, is don't go out and find a permanent solution to a temporary problem. Brian, you and I were working together back in 2008, 2009. And there were a lot of clients that were getting close to that capitulation point. They were saying, I need to sell. I want to go to cash. I don't want to do this. I can't do this anymore. I can't do this anymore. That is a very permanent solution to a temporary problem. The market came back. It recovered. But if you're someone who allows yourself to behave emotionally and sell at the world's worst time, it's going to be really, really hard for you to recover from that. It's going to be really, really hard for you to make that back.
Well, I think there's a false belief that people have, and I have an illustration here to show it, is that they think, okay, if it hurts right now, I'll just go to cash for a little bit, let this pass, and then I know I'm disciplined. I hear the guys talk about they ought to be disciplined. I'll get back in. That's not a problem. The problem is, guys, this is why timing is a disaster. It's a thief in a lot of ways. It's because if you look up on the screen, we have the S&P 500. It's the roller coaster screen. I just had them put it on here. I have some numbers I want to put with this. If you look at the Great Recession actually, we could go all the way back to the dot-com bubble, because that was one of the longest ones out there. People don't realize when markets go down, we call it the rubber band effect, is that there's energy being built up as markets are falling, that if you try to time it and get out, there's a good chance you're going to miss when that rubber band is released, and all that energy, the force of recovery exerts itself. If you're sitting on the sidelines, you're going to get left out. Because here's some numbers I want you to pay attention to. What a difference a month, a year, and then even a month and a year can do. Because if you think about the dot-com bubble burst, you can see that was dragged on for close to 2 years, so maybe even a little over 2 years. Well, when you hit the dead bottom of October 9th of 2002, if you looked at the recovery, that first month of recovery, unbelievably, the S&P 500 made 15.2% in one month.
30 trading days.
So fast forward to 12 months from that October 9th, fast forward, take that to October of 2003. The 12-month period there was 33.7% rate of return.
So if you're someone who's trying to sell and get out and get back in, you might be able to jump off the train. It is really hard to jump right back on that train.
So fast forward, because that's the dot-com bubble. Let's do it up. Maybe that was a fluke. Maybe that just happened one time. No, that's not true. In the Great Recession, Think about 2008, 2009. The bottom of the Great Recession was March 9th of 2009. So if you looked at that first month, March 9th, 2009 to April 9th of 2009, it generated 26.6% in a month.
In one
month, we almost got 30% because realize that was a crash. I mean, that thing went down fast. You pulled and built up a lot of energy in that rubber band effect. It released, and then fast forward a full year. So if we go from March 9th of 2009 through March of 2010, guess what, guys? 68.5% rate of return.
In 1 year.
This is why timing is a thief. Don't think that, hey, it will feel so much better emotionally if I just sit on the sidelines, let this all pass, I'll get in this. No, it's going to be a disaster.
But you guys are saying, okay, I don't get it. And by the way, I'm just unlucky, Brian. Like I started a Roth IRA back in the day, and I did it, and the market crashed. I'm not good at this investing thing. It's just not something I want to do. We want to let you know that you don't have to be the best investor ever, and we put together an illustration to show you this. So let's assume that you were the best investor ever. We're going to call you Billy the Best. In 1980, the average income for Billy was $12,500. If Billy was a great saver, saving 25% of his income, or $261 a month, he would be a great saver. But not only is he a great saver, he has also got the markets figured out. He says, you know what? I'm going to buy at the very bottom of every bear market.
Well, he's got the almanac.
He has the almanac. He's Biff.
He's Biff.
This
he
is
went
Biff.
back. We should name this Biff the Best.
Why do we name him Biff the Best?
We should name him, instead of Billy, he should be Biff the Best. Or maybe Billy and Biff are brothers, and they both went back in time. But he's got the almanac. He knows when markets are going to hit the dead bottom. He saves up his cash and waits and puts it in right at the right point.
So that's one type of investor. Now let's look at unlucky Ursula, great naming Daniel. Again, same income, $12,500 a year in 1980. Savings rate is the same, about $261 a month. But she does it all wrong, unfortunately. Instead of buying at the very bottom, she buys at the very top, at the highest market time before it drops, before it loses. So she's not a very good investor.
Yeah, Ursula goes to the cocktail party and waits for her brother-in-law to tell how much money he made in this great thing at the maximum point of financial risk.
Yep.
And she loads it up. So she's horrible at investing.
And then we have the other one. Then I'm going to call this boring. This is DCA Diane, dollar cost average Diane. And she's same scenario, same income, same savings, but she just buys every single month and doesn't try to time the market. She's not trying to be the best or worst. She's just going to be consistent. So if you look at a picture of when they invest, you can see here are all the market peaks that Ursula invests, and you can see here are all the market troughs that Billy or Biff invests in, and then Diane is just buying the whole time. She's doing other stuff. She's just letting her dollars work. All three of them, when they've worked through the scenario, have saved or invested or contributed the same amount of money. About $132,000 is what they've saved from 1980 all the way until now. Well, Billy, who was amazing at this, his $132,000 has turned into 1.8.
That is amazing.
That's pretty spectacular.
Just take that number in. They got $132,000 invested. You know, he had the almanac, so of course he's shooting fish in the barrel.
Yep.
He's almost $1.8 million. That's pretty good. I think most people would be. I don't know if that buys the casino that Biff got in Back to the Future, but that's pretty respectful.
Pretty good. Well, Ursula, you know, she's probably broke, right? She did it all wrong. Not so fast. Ursula still has $1.1 million. $1.1 million. She invested $132,000 and she's still a millionaire, even being the worst investor of all time. But then there's Diane, right? And Diane was just boring. She invested the same $132,000. Her portfolio, though, is actually the best. She is now a multi-millionaire from just being consistent. She didn't freak out during the dot-com bubble bursting. She didn't lose her mind in the Great Recession. She didn't run for the hills in the fourth quarter of 2018. COVID did not make her pull her soldiers out of the army of dollar bills. Instead, she decided to stay consistent and stick to the plan. And every time things got scary, she had a drink. And that drink led her to be a multi-millionaire.
This is why I always recommend. I mean, the easiest thing you can do is just always be buying. You know, don't react. Just have a plan that's going to be good before, during, and after. And, we're crazy if we don't mention to you guys. If you go to moneyguy.com, we actually have a resource page and we have a wealth multiplier, because I always focus on, this koozie right here. For a 21-year-old, and inflation's making this harder to work, but go with me here. $1 has the potential. Back when you could buy $1 beers in college towns,
way back
when you were 21, when you're 21. By the time you retired, 45 years in the future, that $1 had the opportunity to turn into $88. Mm-hmm. I think that everybody out here, I want you to, like I said, moneyguy.com/resources. We have a wealth multiplier where you can put your age in and see what it would actually be worth. Every one of you have the opportunity to turn that dollar into something spectacular, but you just have to buy through it. Don't let your emotions be your enemy and get you to have regret in the future because you betrayed yourself by reacting and losing. And look, here's something, because I know we had some great clients reach out to us. We do 401k plans. Mm-hmm. And I know there's participants out there that your money's even better than $1 turning into 88. If you have an employer match where they're doing 50 cents on the dollar or a dollar for dollar match, this potentially could turn into close to $170. That $1 does if you got a dollar for dollar match. Don't forget to keep and give that component of time and the automatic behavior of investing. Don't let them steal this super opportunity for you to be successful in the future just because we're going through market volatility. Remember, you don't get these great rates of returns without the volatility of knowing every decade, 2 to 3 years, you're going to have recessions or you're going to have downturns, pandemics. We don't know what the next thing will be, but you can pretty much know 2 to 3 years, every decade, every 10 years, you're going to have something that's going to disrupt things. But that's okay, because long term, it's going to be good. Stay the course. Don't let your emotions react to you. You're not an animal. You are a thinking person that is beyond your financial mutant. And you're going to actually figure out, how do I create opportunity out of this situation? And
we are going to keep loading you up. So make sure you check out the website. Go to moneyguy.com. If you want to know more about what we do in our day job, how to fulfill the abundance cycle, go to aboundwealth.com. Thank you so much for letting us be a part of your financial journey.
I'm your host, Brian Preston, Mr. Bo Hanson, Money Guy team, out.